Today marks the first time actual witness interviews from the Trump impeachment probe are going public. And this is just the beginning, as elected Republicans are confronted with these full transcripts from the witness depositions, 2 today, more tomorrow, then public hearings. And it will become harder for Trump defenders to credibly deny the corroborated facts. The president demanded Ukraine go after the Bidens, and that has some Trump allies struggling with the defense.
Was there a time when military aid was held up because the president wanted Ukraine to look into the Bidens?
I don't know, but I know they've got their aid.
I look at it this way. The aid is there, and the investigations didn't happen. So if there was a quid pro quo, it certainly wasn't a very effective one.
Look, take the quid pro quo thing. All of foreign relations is quid pro quo. You know, we do things for them, they do things for us. There's good quid pro quo, there's bad quid pro quo. This quid pro quo, if it actually was completed, which it wasn't, was a good thing.
Remember when Trump went from no collusion to pro-collusion? Well, the message here has gone from no quid pro quo to all foreign policy is quid pro quo to don't forget about good quid pro quo. Now, it's not just about pundits and Trump defenders. The people with an actual vote on Trump's potential guilt, U.S. senators, are also debating these very arguments. A growing number of Republican senators considering admitting there was a quid pro quo in order to acknowledge some of the facts, while landing on the argument that it would still not be impeachable. The Washington Post reporting that option was raised at a recent private Senate GOP lunch, where Senator John Kennedy said maybe there was a quid pro quo, but the U.S. government often attaches conditions to foreign aid. Now, President Trump's responded to that article by arguing it was, quote, false, but adding there's nothing wrong with a quid pro quo because it's not even an impeachable event. Note that while pretending to shoot down that story, the president's actually giving it attention on Twitter and endorsing the core defense argument that Republicans are looking to argue that any quid pro quo, bribery, would not be impeachable. Fact check. False. Bribery is impeachable. It's actually one of only 2 specified offenses listed as impeachable. We were just discussing this earlier in the show. Now, it's always up to the Senate to decide what to do in any trial, but as a constitutional argument, bribery is one of the most impeachable examples you could possibly come up with. Now, those senators are not the only potential jurors in a Trump-related trial. You know what starts tomorrow? Jury selection in the trial of Trump's longest-serving advisor, Roger Stone, for witness tampering. Now, if the House does impeach Donald Trump, it is now entirely possible that both he and his longtime advisor could be awaiting verdicts at the same time. And the senators are facing voters who increasingly back impeachment, something the president remains in denial about.
Mr. President, according to several recent polls, more Americans want you to be impeached and removed from office than the number of Americans who don't.
You're reading the wrong polls.
Wall Street Journal, NBC,
let me just tell you,
ABC, Washington Post.
I have the real polls. I have the real polls. The CNN polls are fake. The Fox polls have always been lousy.
You know, the president's mentality there could be summed up by another confident sometime defendant, Sean Carter, who famously said, "He who does not feel me is not real to me." A psychological denial of anyone who doesn't support or feel you. In that same song, Carter goes on to say, cops want to knock me, DA wants to box me in, but somehow I beat them charges like Rocky. Can Roger Stone, who you see there on video getting arrested, beat the charges like Rocky? Can Donald Trump? We are back on this mounting case against President Trump with Washington Bureau Chief 4, Mother Jones, David Corn, and Comedy's John Podhoretz, a former speechwriter for President Reagan. Good evening to both of you.
Hi. Good evening.
David, I put the Sean Carter question to you first. Can Trump beat these charges like Rocky, and can he do so with this new bribery-type defense?
Well, I don't think he's saying that he committed bribery. I think he said it was beautiful and perfect, whatever you might want to call it. I think it's pretty clear. Day by day, the evidence gets stronger and stronger that there was corrupt intent and that it wasn't just a quid pro quo, extortion, bribery. These are better descriptions of what happened. So he's not going to beat the charge in the sense that it's likely that the House is going to go ahead and impeach him and send him to a trial in the Senate where chaos can rule and we don't know what's going to happen. And at this point, it's hard to conceive of those Republican senators voting to convict him. They're trying to do everything they can to concede reality, to acknowledge reality, but yet claim that there's nothing really wrong here, or at least nothing that's impeachable. So, He's not going to, I don't know if there's a rap song about beating an indictment, but if there is, it would not apply in this case.
I just want to say, I believe from the context of the constitutional mention of bribery that what the founders probably meant there was that if the president were himself paid a bribe, that would be impeachable.
That's the idea. The Ukraine investigation is the bribe. If you're rich, you don't need money.
Okay.
You need power.
Although I thought the bribe was releasing the money. I mean, the
legal theory.
Okay.
Here, we do it right here, live on the beat. The legal theory is you walk in, and if you have no cash for your campaign, you want a briefcase of cash.
Right.
If you're the sitting president of the United States, you don't need a briefcase of cash. In this case, the election help he wants, the bribe he's seeking in his office, is Ukraine announcing the investigation, which they already did, basically, and hopefully, in his case, doing it.
Right.
That's the bribe.
Well, look, it's bad. However you slice it, it's bad. That was never intended to be a defense, and I understand. I mean, the question is what you posed before the break, which is, will Republicans say, when all this is said and done, what happened wasn't good, but we're not going to kick him out of office for it? And I think that is 95% what's going to happen.
You think that's where
they
it's
will
headed?
say that there will be a rainbow of views going from what he did was just wonderful because we need to find out about those terrible Bidens and whether a server was buried in the sands of Ukraine, or it was really bad. But look, there's an election coming up in November. The American public now has the facts, and the American public will serve as the impeachment. Will serve to remove the president.
Well, and part of the Washington Post coverage here says, look, the president's frustrated the Senate Republicans by seeming to change his messaging strategy every day, rather than present a coherent defense of his actions. That it is unusual. We've kind of looked at some of the past historical examples of impeachment. And one thing that's unusual is to have the Senate in the lead because the client won't pick a defense.
Right. Well, look, even weirder is you can see that the Senate, that the smart, cynical thing to do if you don't want to remove him from office is to say, look, he did a bad thing, but it's not the worst thing. It's not, he didn't shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, and there's an election coming up. Trump may himself be unsatisfied by that and may punish. Then the question is he going to make it clear to Republican senators that he will look askance if they do that and criticize him, because he doesn't like to be criticized at all? And will he do it in such a way that they could get primaried? Will there be time for someone to primary them in 2020? And that we really don't know the answer. Obviously, the thing that he needs is to not be removed from office if there's an impeachment. But, he doesn't play safe ball. He may swing for the fences and say, not only shouldn't you remove me from office, you have to defend me during this process. I did that. Call was perfect.
Right. And
say the call was perfect.
And to John's point, David, that's clearly where a lot of Senate Republicans disagree with the president on, meaning in John's analysis, whatever egocentric reasons there may be for a certain defense, these are Republicans, some of whom are up this cycle, some of whom are up later, and they don't necessarily want to own all of that. As for the improvising, I want to play for you, David, because we always try to get everyone we can on the show to get through all these defenses and ideas. And we had the top national spokesperson for the RNC on. This was just Friday. And she was sort of going back and forth from nothing to see here to what I affectionately call the double Mulvaney. We do it all the time. Take a look. Mick Mulvaney, just to be clear, quote, what you described as a quid pro quo. Mick Mulvaney, we do it all the time with foreign policy. That's why we held up the money. Was he wrong when he admitted that?
He said we held up the money because, and it's on the transcript, we can all read it for yourselves. We wanted Europe to do more, our allies, why weren't they doing more to help Ukraine? And we wanted cooperation in the legitimate Justice Department investigation into Ukraine election meddling in the 2016 election.
You're kind of doing a double Mulvaney. You're saying, yeah, this was part of it. Yes, that's what you needed from Ukraine.
It had nothing to do with Biden.
David, I mean, it had to do with Biden because the White House admitted that already.
And it had to do with the servers and a far-right kooky conspiracy theory. I mean, the problem that some of these Republican senators are going to have is that Trump and his acolytes and fellow cultists, like you just had in your show, change their tune. They basically create a never-ending whipsaw of whether things are wrong, not wrong, right, not right. And it's, he makes it very hard for reasonable people who want to have a toe in the pool of reality to stick with. And to defend.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. You're saying, David, that going full Mulvaney, David, you're saying going full Mulvaney still allows Senate Republicans to look less counterfactual.
To a certain degree, I don't think they're going to go full Mulvaney, because full Mulvaney now is like a 360-degree whirling dervish, and you don't really know where they're going to land because they change every moment the White House position. I do think, I think John's right. I think other people have said this. They will find a way to create a certain degree of distance from the chaos of the Trump defense.
Well, I think basically what we have here is Republicans are going to be like Tim Matheson in Animal House when they're on trial, and he basically says, they say, did you do this? And he's like, I'm not going to have you, run down the United States of America and march out of the hall. We don't know what Republicans are going to do. One thing that we know that they will do either in the impeachment or the removal is there will be some kind of stunt at some point where there's a walkout or there's a scene, or they basically say, we don't accept the legitimacy of any of this, and just stunt it out.
Well, you see, David, we started with Sean Carter and we ended with stunting.
Well, we didn't get to twerking.
That's true.
We're all too old to twerk,
John,
David. You and I are
fact check, John. We did not get to twerking.
I have nothing to add there. I have nothing to add.
It's rare.
Tragic.
It's rare to have these moments.
I've gone totally up.
My special thanks to David and John. We went through a lot of it, and thankfully not all of it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.